Imagine this. A musical by Cole Porter. You know, the genius behind Kiss Me, Kate, Anything Goes. Absolute titan of Broadway.
Right.
And this show runs for just 78 performances. A really short run.
Yeah, it sounds almost impossible, doesn't it?
It does, like a footnote that just doesn't quite fit the story of a legend.
Mm-hmm.
So today, we're doing a deep dive into that very show you never know. It's often just written off as a Porter flop. Simple as that.
Yeah, that's the common wisdom.
But what we found digging into our sources is that the full story is, well, it's way more complicated, much more dramatic, and honestly, just fascinating. It's not just about the songs going wrong.
That's absolutely right. When you look at Porter's whole career, I mean, incredibly successful, right?
Totally.
So you never know, 78 performances, it really stands out. It's an anomaly.
Big time.
And just to give you some perspective, only Orson Welles around the world in 80 days had a shorter run. 75 performances.
Okay.
But, and this is really key from the historical accounts, around the world wasn't really a Porter show. It was an Orson Welles thing, an extravaganza. Porter's part was pretty minimal. He kind of got caught up in Welles's huge, ambitious project.
So collateral damage almost.
Exactly. But you never know. That almost always gets pinned directly on Porter himself, like a black mark on his record.
And that's exactly what we're going to challenge today. Our mission, really, is to pull back the curtain on this lesser-known bit of theater history. It's actually incredibly dramatic.
It really is.
We're going to uncover why You Never Know truly failed. And, you know, you might be surprised that the blame absolutely does not, like people usually think, lie just with the composer.
It's a real cautionary tale.
Yeah, about ego, ambition, creative control. That whole balance. Okay, let's unpack this.
Where do we start?
Well, to really get why it went so wrong, we kind of need to understand what the show was supposed to be originally.
Good point. The origins.
Let's start right at the beginning.
Yeah.
Because Where You Never Know came from is actually pretty surprising. And it gives us our first big clue about why it eventually failed. This wasn't like an original idea cooked up for Cole Porter. Not at all.
No.
Our research shows it was based on a Viennese play from 1927 by Siegfried Geyer. It was called Kleine Komödie.
Kleine Komödie, yeah. Also known as By Kerzenlicht.
Right, by Kerzenlicht.
And that play, it actually had a pretty good life even before Porter got involved.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was adapted into English as Candlelight. And guess who did the adaptation?
Who?
P.G. Wodehouse.
No way. The Jeeves guy.
The very same master of witty dialogue, right?
Amazing.
And his version ran for 128 performances in New York back in 1929. Starred Gertrude Lawrence and Leslie Howard.
Wow, big names.
Huge names. And the reviews called it sardonically elegant. So, you know, sophisticated, clever humor.
Okay, I give the picture. Classy stuff.
Definitely. It even got turned into a film in 1933 by Candlelight. Our source mentions it was lightweight, unpretentious, maybe some obvious humor, but still had that charming, intimate feel.
So the core plot, it's basically a classic mix-up, right? A confusion of identity-love quadrangle.
Exactly. That's the heart of it.
So the little intrigue, as they called it, is like this. Madame Bolton's maid, Maria, she pretends to be her boss on a secret date with Baron de Romer's valet, Gaston. But Maria thinks Gaston is the actual Baron.
Right. The old switcheroo.
Yeah. Then the real Baron shows up, figures it out, and pretends to be the valet to help Gaston.
Okay, getting complicated.
But then, Madame Bolton herself arrives and accidentally blows the whole thing wide open.
Oh, dear. Classic farce setup.
Totally. Intimate, funny, lots of witty banter, just perfect for a clever little period comedy, not some huge spectacle.
And what's really neat, you know, historically speaking, is how the Viennese writers Adler, Frank, and Geyer, they took this classic French idea, Marivaux's quadrille of the quid pro quo.
Their masters play servants and servants play masters.
Exactly that, creating all that comedic chaos. They turned that into this charming Lustspiel.
Lustspiel, like a light comedy.
Yeah, basically. A light, fun, often romantic comedy. And just before Porter, there was another musical version in Vienna, 1937.
Wow, okay.
Robert Kacher's By Kerzenlicht. And the accounts describe Kacher's music as charming, elegant, and spirited. Even French in conception, but feels Viennese.
So it really doubles down on that light, sophisticated, intimate feeling.
Absolutely. That was the DNA of the piece, through all its versions.
Okay, so we've got this genuinely charming, intimate farce. It's got a proven track record play, Viennese musical. Sounds like a slam dunk, doesn't it?
You'd think so.
Which brings us, inevitably, to the main reason it all went wrong. John Shubert.
Ah, yes. The producer.
His grand vision, which turned out to be completely ruinous.
The Shuberts, of course, huge theater empire. They'd produced Catcher's the Wonder Bar before, so they knew his work.
Right. And Porter gets involved kind of indirectly summer of 37 in Paris. Apparently there was this other idea first, a show called Greek to You.
That's what our source mentions, yeah. Before You Never Know took over.
And here's a fun detail. Porter apparently sketched out the lyrics for At Long Last Love on stationery from the SS Normandy.
The famous ocean liner. Very chic.
Very Porter.
But it's crucial to remember, Porter had that really bad writing accident in October 37.
Right, that must have impacted things.
Hugely. 2 big surgeries followed. It stopped him composing for a while, but his contract for You Never Know actually had a clause. It let him miss rehearsals because of his partial physical disability.
Okay. That's important context.
It really is, because it helps explain why he wasn't physically present later when things really started going off the rails.
Makes sense.
But even with all that, by late 37, he had already written key songs. At Long Last Love, From Alpha to Omega, the title song You Never Know.
So the musical core was there.
Yeah.
And it matched that light comedic tone.
Exactly. The foundation was pure Porter, fitting the original play.
Okay, now, Schubert's big mistake, his colossal misstep.
Go on.
John Shubert, apparently, was trying to basically become the next Flo Ziegfeld, who had recently died.
Ah, the Follies legacy. Big, lavish spectacles.
Exactly. So instead of embracing the intimate charm of Klein Commodity,
he decided to blow it up.
Totally. Turn it into a massive, spectacular... And it wasn't just a bad idea. It was like textbook producer ego wrecking a project.
Yeah, ambition overriding the actual material.
The reviews called the result a rummage sale.
Mm-hmm.
Because Shubert just kept cramming in gratuitous material on his own.
A rummage sale. Ouch. What kind of stuff?
Get this. Our source lists showgirls brought over from a totally different show, Between the Devil.
Seriously.
Yep. Plus the Debonair's Dancing Boys.
Mm-hmm.
And old burlesque jokes just shoved in. Didn't matter if you fit the character or, good taste.
Oh, my goodness.
He even insisted on this visually vulgar bathing suit scene. Totally out of step with the original elegant farce. More like lowbrow burlesque.
Wow, just completely changing the tone.
Completely.
And that grand kind of misplaced vision, it also caused huge problems with the cast, right? More friction inside the production.
Yeah, big time. Libby Holman, playing Madame Bolton, apparently signed on really reluctantly. She'd kind of given up on Broadway. And then you had Lupe Velez as the maid, Maria. She apparently came with a reputation. Troublemaker.
Uh-oh.
And during the tryouts, things got really tense between her and Holman. There was this big temperamental clash, apparently, over Holman getting extra songs.
Yikes.
It got so bad, the director, Roland Leigh, actually walked out of rehearsals until they could compose their differences.
Drama behind the scenes. But how did audiences react to Velez?
Well, that's the fascinating part. Despite all the backstage fireworks, audience reaction to Velez was often really positive.
Really?
Yeah, headlines from the tryouts read, "Show stopped by Lupe Velez wins ovation."
Huh. So maybe the performers weren't the core issue.
Exactly. The real problem was brewing higher up in Schubert's decisions.
Which brings us back to the director, Roland Leigh.
Right. And this is where it goes from tension to just outright war over the show's artistic integrity.
Okay.
Leigh was apparently furious when John Shubert brought in George Abbott, another big director, to suggest improvements.
Without telling Leigh.
And Shubert claimed Porter had asked for it, which was apparently a total lie.
Wow. Deliberately undermining his own director.
Seems like it. Here's where it gets really interesting.
I believe it. This is more than just creative differences. It's like a breakdown of trust.
Totally.
And our source actually quotes this scathing letter Leigh wrote to Shubert in April 1938.
What did it say?
Leigh said the show had disintegrated beyond belief. He argued it had been made drearily old-fashioned, stripped of every possible hint of taste and distinction. Just brutal.
Oof. Did he mention Velez?
He did. He said Velez, talented as she was, had been allowed but encouraged to run riot. And he compared it to how Gertrude Lawrence supposedly wrecked the original by candlelight.
Wow. So he felt the performance style was also part of the problem Shubert created.
Seems so. And Leigh even claimed Porter was 100% in agreement that the show had disintegrated completely.
So the writer and director were seeing eye to eye on the disaster unfolding.
That's what Leigh asserted, united in their despair over what Shubert was doing.
It's almost maddening to read about, isn't it? just disregarding the creative team, pushing his own vision no matter what.
Despite all the evidence, all the experts telling him it was wrong.
But Shubert just brushed Lee's concerns aside, kept making changes.
Like that bathing suit scene.
Yep, insisted on keeping it. And he even kept this plagiarized joke Lee specifically wanted cut.
Unbelievable.
It really seems like Shubert was playing this manipulative game, pitting Porter against Lee, both against Abbott.
All while pushing his own agenda for a bigger, flashier show.
Yeah, regardless of whether it made any artistic sense, he was just tearing it apart piece by piece.
And the conflict was so bad that even George Abbott, the guy Shubert brought in, he ended up complaining too.
Really? To who?
Directly to John Shubert's father, J.J. Shubert. Abbott basically said, look, it seems a little unjust that you should be hooked with my version and then decide to do an entirely different kind of show.
Wow. That confirms it wasn't just Lee being difficult.
Not at all. The whole creative team was at odds with the producer. A complete breakdown in leadership, no cohesive vision left.
So, with all this chaos, this constant meddling, it's maybe not surprising that Porter himself seems to have checked out.
Became disengaged.
Yeah. The records say that after Spring-Summer 37, there's virtually no evidence of Porter's engagement with the show.
Could be a few reasons for that.
Like what?
Well, his accident physically stopped him going to rehearsals, like we said, and his contract allowed it.
Right.
But also, he was probably busy with Leave It to Me.
Ah, the other musical.
Yeah, it opened shortly after You Never Know, November 38, and that's the show that launched Mary Martin with My Heart Belongs to Daddy.
Okay, so his focus likely shifted to a project that, wasn't a complete train wreck.
Understandably, yeah. Probably promised more artistic freedom, better chance of success.
And what's really telling, too, is what happened to some of Porter's original songs for You Never Know, the ones that got cut.
Oh, yeah, like By Candlelight, which was meant to be this intimate, just piano-only number.
Perfect for the original idea.
Exactly. And I'm Going In for Love, which our source says had this graceful Viennese swing.
Delicate, sophisticated.
Right. These cut songs, they really hew to the show's original intimate conception, as the research puts it.
So cutting them just reinforces how far Shubert pulled the show away from Porter's original vision and the play's spirit.
Totally. I mean, can you imagine hearing those subtle, quiet songs in this huge theater after Shubert added all the flashy, loud stuff?
No, it wouldn't fit at all, like putting chamber music in a stadium, like you said before.
Right.
So what does this all mean for why You Never Know ultimately failed? What was the final nail in the coffin?
Well, the final fatal blow was probably the theater itself, the choice of venue.
Where did it play?
The Shuberts put it in the Winter Garden Theater. Massive place. 1,526 seats.
Whoa, that's huge. Especially for an intimate farce.
Exactly. The Winter Garden was where they usually put giant revues, like the Ziegfeld Follies.
Okay, totally wrong vibe.
Totally. Our source says choosing that venue militated against the success of what was at heart an intimate period farce.
It just felt wrong. And probably expensive, too.
Hugely expensive.
Yeah.
Staging even a small story in a huge house like that meant prohibitive costs. It basically made it impossible to turn a profit, even if the show had been great.
So it was almost designed to fail financially from the start.
Pretty much seems that way. The conclusion from our deep dive, looking at all the accounts, is pretty clear. And it's damning.
What's the bottom line?
The blame for You Never Know's failure. It lies mostly with John Shubert, his meddling in and mismanagement of the show.
All that manipulation.
Right. His disingenuousness in playing Porter against Lee, Lee against Abbott, and all three of them against his own intentions. That sabotaged everything.
Wow.
There's a quote from the Theater Arts Monthly Review at the time that sums it up perfectly.
What did they say?
As an intimate review, it might have passed, but it dies under the weight of musical comedy routine and the size of the theater.
So bottom line, Porter wasn't to blame.
Not primarily, no. Despite his name being on it, it's a powerful lesson, really. How a producer's ego, that bigger is better idea detached from the art itself, can just destroy a project's potential.
It's truly incredible, though. After all that chaos, the fighting, the show closing so fast, that some of Cole Porter's songs from You Never Know actually survived.
Yeah, they defied their origins, became part of the Porter canon.
We're talking songs like From Alpha to Omega, the title song, You Never Know.
And of course the huge one, At Long Last Love.
An absolute timeless classic. Just amazing. It came out of such a mess.
It really is.
And for those of you listening who might be curious to actually hear some of these remarkable songs rescued from the wreckage, We'll put a link in the episode description.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's a fantastic 2001 recording of the score. Stars Kristin Chenoweth. It's really worth a listen.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, definitely check that out. You know, this whole story, it really raises a big question.
What's that?
What does the saga of You Never Know tell us about that tricky balance, that tightrope walk between artistic vision and commercial ambition in any creative process? Mm-hmm. And maybe how focusing only on bigger is better can just completely undermine what a project could truly be, no matter how much talent is involved.
That's a great question. And it resonates way beyond just Broadway, right?
Yeah.
To pretty much any creative field.
Absolutely.
Well, we hope this deep dive has maybe given you a fresh look at what really makes a flop. Mm-hmm. And how sometimes the story behind the curtain is way more dramatic and maybe more insightful than anything the audience ever gets to see.